Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. Here, we look closely at the intersections of the postpartum window, the Ayurvedic perspective on health and healing, and the universal mother principles that are the keys to giving and receiving effective care. Hello, I'm Christine Eck. I'll be taking you through interviews with professionals who are making a profound difference in the lives of their clients, conversations with individuals brave enough to share their stories of vulnerability as a way to lift up others, and my own journey through birth, parenting, caregiving, and building a conscious business. We are here to honor the sacred windows, the profound transitions in life that give it all meaning. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. It is my pleasure today to welcome Andrea Claassen. Andrea has graciously invited me on her podcast a couple of times. She is the host of the Peaceful Power podcast, which is amazing. Please listen to it. But Andrea she does so many things. I was just listening to you say about all the hats you wear and the things that you know and share, but you've been an Ayurvedic wellness counselor for over 14 years. You are a certified personal trainer. You're a yoga teacher. You're a pre and postpartum specialist. You have a degree in sports and exercise science and psychology. You're a mama. What I love so much about what you do, Andrea, is you have this, traditional athletic sports training background, but you also have this beautiful Ayurvedic lens with which you teach people. And that to me is what I'm so excited to talk about today, about how people can move back into fitness, like really reclaiming our strength in ways that we might feel disconnected with after birth, and really just forever, like not even just postpartum, um, but how we can do that in ways that actually stick and that are digestible. Also, I just want to say that since we last spoke and I discovered, so Andrea's from the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I'm also from the Twin Cities. And in connecting recently, we discovered that we go to the same lake every summer. And may I remind you that there are over 10,000 of Minnesota. So I feel like you're like a long lost sister. I'm really happy to have that layer introduced here to this conversation. So just welcome, Andrea. Please fill in anything that I may have missed in introducing you.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. It's such a pleasure to be on and sharing my wisdom, I guess, with you of random things I know and have studied and embodied through the years. Because this is my favorite thing to do, is just kind of share this, which I think is needed out there in the space of like that empowerment with the fitness piece. Because I think for many years, having been a personal trainer for 18 years now, the shift that I've seen from when I first started to now is immense in the best ways. And so just getting people to be on board with that and realizing, oh, this is not, the early 2000 fitness anymore. Like we have different ways and better ways to approach women's health.
Totally. And so how did you get started? Were you an athlete as a young person, and how did you move into this work?
Yeah, so I was a 3-sport athlete in high school and in college. And at the time, I was like, I'm going to be an athletic trainer. And I went to a class and they described the worst injury they ever saw. And I immediately knew this was not the profession I wanted to do because I could not stomach the description. And, half of the class left, like, gonna have to throw up as they described it. And so the person was like, yeah, I do that intentionally because that kind of weeds people out. I stayed and listened to the story, but then that was kind of my first yoga of like, okay, I'm here, but I'm also like, can I meditate and not really dive into the story? And so I was like, okay, that's not for me. What's next? And I just became a personal trainer because I didn't really know what else to do. And then really fell in love with it. And I remember my first mentor, like, because you get your certification, I have my degree. And then you're like, oh, wait, they hired me. I actually don't know what I'm doing to write a program. And so I found like the nicest looking like female trainer on the staff who like looked kind and had this great energy. And I was like, Sherry, what do I do? And she just became my mentor and just taught me and trained me. And I'm so, I mean, just for free, just out of the kindness of her heart. And so I personally love doing that for people who are like, I don't know where to begin because of what she did for me. And then I just kind of went from there. My first postpartum client. So I was a fresh trainer. And I remember telling my mom, and my mom goes, do you know? And at the time she was pregnant with her first, she's like, do you know that, there's a baby inside of her? And I was like, I'm 22. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And she's like, do you really know what you're doing? And I'm like, well, now, no, maybe not. And so I started studying and learning. And that's where that kind of became my specialty out of default. And then have since the field has grown immensely from what we learned. We had this little thin ACE book that all of the exercises in there are outdated. All of the information is outdated, but that's where we started. And that's what we had, 18 years ago. And then present day, it's changed immensely. And personally, it's my favorite, clients to work with is that pre-postpartum space and like just that tenderness that is needed in postpartum. And that's personally what I love to help women kind of just like have a safe space to just be. And sometimes cry, because those first like training sessions, like for myself, like that's hard. And to be like, my body cannot do what it used to do. And if you were an athlete, because I've had a lot of high level athletes that work with me, it's very humbling. And then just being that safe space, being like, it's okay. Like we are just going to build and it's going to take time and we don't have to be where we were. Like it's just having that grace with ourselves.
Right, which is not so easy to do when you're in that tender space and just handling the pressures from our culture, which kind of indicate that, we should be able to do X, Y, and Z when our body and our heart and our consciousness is like, actually, no, that's not time. It's not time for that
Yes.
quite yet. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why I tell people too, that 6 week mark, often all people are like, okay. So especially if it's with their first, like they're like 6 weeks, I'll reach back out to you at 6 weeks. And I always tell people, just listen to your body. Like if you are like, that's way too early, like, please just take as much time as you need. And often what I find is people are like, no, I'm not ready to like return to things at 6 weeks. And, the more they can kind of tune in, and often it's closer to like 8 to 10 to 12. And so just putting that out there, because sometimes again, we're like, I should be doing this at 6 weeks because that's what, everyone says. No, like for the most part, most people are actually not really diving into things. They're like, I need more space, I need more time. You're not sleeping, you're not recovered. Like just have grace with yourself.
And so at what point did you realize you wanted to bring the Ayurvedic lens into your work?
So when I was pregnant with my first, who is now almost 10, everyone's like, oh, you're going to bounce back. You're a trainer, all of the things, which then like builds up to like pressure, I think, internalized. And I didn't bounce back like in the terms like mentally, physically. I went on a trip 6 weeks postpartum. I went to California for like a business retreat. And I remember it was originally supposed to be 5 weeks, but then the people pushed it back. And I remember clients who have kids were all like, are you sure that's a little early? And, as a first time mom, you're like, you don't know what to expect and what that really looks like. And so I was like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. So I went, and I think that really threw a lot of that vata out of balance. And so I had briefly learned about Ayurveda the year before. And I'm like, it just, something was calling to me to like, look into Ayurveda. Like you need some deeper healing than that. And so that was my first kind of dive into Ayurveda. And that is what helped me postpartum just come out of all of my funk, which I'm sure was a very deep vata imbalance that I was experiencing. And I just needed to calm myself down and just do the grounding practices. I returned to just eating basic warm cooked meals. I changed the way I was working out because I actually, and again, was a trainer for many years, specialized in this. I came back at 6 weeks because that's what you were supposed to do. And I'm a trainer. I know what I'm doing. Tore my glute. And so was out like on the floor crying after bowel movements because it hurt so bad. And so like that is always my story to tell clients who are like myself, like in the Ayurvedic landscape, very pitta, just very driven. And if they were athletes in particular, I'm always like, just hold back a little. Like you might feel like, yeah, let's go. But the body is still healing. And even though it might feel okay, like just take things easier than you maybe normally would. And so that was my dive into Ayurveda, and it's how it kind of got thrown onto my lap, and it helped me immensely. And then postpartum after my second, who is now 2.5, like I followed all the Ayurvedic principles, and like everyone was like cooking me soups and doing all of the things. And so that helped me, like night and day difference between my first and my second postpartum experiences with having Ayurveda and worth not having it that first time. So that really helped me also sprinkle this into my personal training clients. And I teach them, here are ways that you can also recover postpartum than just looking through this fitness lens.
Right. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like I didn't have this knowledge after I became a mom the first time, but I did the second, and it was exactly that, like night and day. But the piece that I didn't have is, not being an athletic person at the time. I feel like I am more now, but at the time, um, so I'm curious to know from you, like, how did your fitness and like coming back into your, your practice, like, how did that change the second time? How did you do it the second time? So as not to like aggravate your vata or hurt yourself.
Like, when did I even, I don't, I think I just did at home workouts. I never went to the gym because I didn't have a gym membership after my second. It's funny that I'm like, I haven't even thought of that, reflected on that, but I'm pretty sure I just did stuff at home. I wrote a diastasis recti plan for some healing years ago. I had an opera singer who had like a 5-finger gap, and this was 3 years postpartum. And I'm like, we're gonna give this a go, and it worked. We got her down to like a 2-finger separation, which is actually very incredible for how, because that, if an opera singer, so if we think about what's actually happening there, is that linea alba is separating, and very common, very normal. I know people get scared of it, but it happens, and it's more or less how you manage with symptoms. But as an opera singer, she had symptoms that had something had to be done so she could project and to sing. And so, that program is what I followed myself, which after the first, I had developed it, but I didn't do it after my first. And so the second, I'm like, well, let me do the plan that I give to clients, because this is not like, again, from that athlete brain, the first time I'm like, this is too easy. I should be able to just jump back into things. Whereas the second time I'm like, no, nothing is beneath me. Nothing is too easy. I need to start with the basics. And I think that really helped. And then breathing. So any place I start with people, and I focus on breathing out through the rib cage and not just into the belly. So like diaphragmatic breaths is often one we talk about in yoga, but postpartum, I prefer the rib cage, because if you do have that separation and you're overly focused on that, sometimes you're actually separating that linea alba a little bit more instead of healing into the ribs, because that gets tight during pregnancy. And so that's one of the little shifts that I have clients focus on in that early postpartum stage.
Oh, that's really interesting. So almost more like filling up your sides and your back rather than.
Yes. Yeah. Rather than dumping it all. Because a lot of, and if you
Right.
don't practice yoga, that your instinct is, oh, blow up my belly like a balloon. But if you already have separation, that those muscles need to heal a little bit more before you start focusing that.
Yeah, and I could see how that type of breath awareness, even just because we talk a lot about how pranayama and how this is so supportive postpartum for the nervous system. I mean, it's supportive anytime for the nervous system, but particularly in this super vulnerable transitory space, breath is like a superpower for helping to create regulation in any moment. And I love teaching clients and teaching our students who are going to be working with clients those sort of easy, accessible breath practices that we can do while we're nursing, we can do, while we're resting, anytime like that. And so I could see, because just as you were talking, I was trying, and it's actually like takes some concentration for me to like make sure that I'm filling up the sides and not just my belly. But that could be really beautiful to just like practice as a meditation.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then you can incorporate like the pelvic floor work there. So I usually always have my clients pelvic floor PT, getting in as soon as you can to a good pelvic floor PT, a night and day difference for myself there. I didn't originally after my first, I ended up needing to after the glute tear. And then, the second I found someone who was wonderful. And I will say this because there are really good pelvic floor PTs, and then sometimes there are not the best. And so if you've had like an experience where like, I don't know if they really helped, trying a different one or getting referrals, like often people who work in that postpartum space, they have really good referrals and know the people in the, your area to refer someone to. So that is my caveat there is I always like to have people kind of see one just so I can know what's going on pelvic floor wise. How can I support with what program I'm giving you based on what is happening. If you had a severe tear during birth, maybe you're having a lot of leakage, like how can we prolapse? Many things could be happening that sometimes you know and sometimes you don't know.
How are you sharing your gifts and passion for caregiving with others? In a world where education and awareness around the postpartum window is lacking or missing from our modern systems, we have a profound opportunity to shift that paradigm. You may be a few simple offerings away from making a truly impactful difference in the lives of mothers and families in your community. We are here to support your journey in the ways that work best for you. Schedule a conscious care strategy session to meet one on one with me, and let's identify the right next step for you to begin a path of conscious care for new families that fits your life and your needs. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session to schedule a time that works best for you. That's www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session. Right. And, I will say too, and just note that, pelvic floor therapy is not a standard here in the United States, and it is a standard of care in many other countries. It's just what you do. And so, I find that to be shocking because regardless if any kind of tear or other major complication is happening, the fact of the matter is we birthed a child, and whether or not, even if it was a vaginal birth or not, like there is impact on the body that requires like restabilization, like of everything. And so it blows my mind that that is not a standard of care for everybody postpartum.
And there's different, like the one that I found specialized with helping people return to weightlifting, return to running. And so they had me, here, let me watch your squat. And potentially they could do an internal exam as that's happening so they can see how are you managing the pressure. And so like there are many different ways that you can kind of work with different pelvic floor PTs based on your goals. So runners, same thing, you can find a pelvic floor PT who specializes in return to running.
Oh, that's really cool. That's great to know. So, Andrea, one of the things that when you're working with your clients, you talk about like making small habit changes. And I mentioned to you before we started talking that for me, that really like resonated with the idea of simplicity as one of our universal mother principles. But it's just, there's so much that comes at us after we become parents that overwhelm is like a really common experience. And when that happens, even though we may want to do things, we can't hold on to those. And I think this is probably an experience that people can relate to on any number of levels, not just for postpartum. But I think this is really poignant when we can start with one or two things and then build on those things. But like has that looked like for you in your practice and you know, with yourself when you're working with families? How are we able to potentially really create lasting impact through that sort of small habit approach?
So one thing I think, like, social media, it's great, and then it can also be that double-edged sword. Sometimes you look at and you're like, there's a list of 10 things I need to do before breakfast to take care of myself. And then you're like, I'm failing because I haven't done any of them. And that's kind of the same if I look at it from kind of that wellness lens and throwing in like starting a workout routine. So a lot of people are like, what do you do? I'm like, no, I've been lifting consistently since I'm 16. Not a person you should be asking what I do and then try to mirror what I do. That is not a good approach. I'm like, I lift 4 times a week. I play tennis twice a week. I'm like, and I do sprints on top of that. That is what I can handle because I'm used to that. And I got myself used to that. If people are like, I want to start with 4 times a week. No, 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 no. Like, let's start like simple, easy. So if you're, let's say we'll just take postpartum, like maybe you're just doing that breathing exercise. That's it. Every day, maybe you spend maybe just a minute some days just sitting there breathing into the rib cage, and that is your practice. And then once you slowly start to get into things, just one day a week, can you spend maybe 20 minutes doing some specific exercises during that phase? And then once you've built that up, I always like to do it gradual, like 6 weeks. Now maybe you can add in that second day. Let's consistently do that for 6 weeks. Maybe that's it. 2 is your threshold, and you're looking at your life like, no, there's no way I could add in the third day. It's just not possible right now. And then as kids maybe grow, if you have young kids, you're like, okay, I can add that third day in now. And that's also how I look at it as season of life, knowing, especially for, again, like that pitta, that athlete who might be used to like, I'm failing if I don't get those 4 days in. Like I started with 2, like postpartum. I've built up to 4. I mean, literally probably since February this year, because my son didn't sleep through the night. Didn't sleep through the night until he was 20 months old. And then we also had some, back doses of starting to wake up in the middle of the night again. And so that wears on the body. And, I'm 41 as well. So like that also wears on my hormones. And so if we think about like, I have to do more, like that doesn't at this stage make sense for me because that's actually hurting me in the long run. And I can feel that my body can't recover as fast. And so those are also where you layer in the habits that make sense for you, but looking holistically, am I sleeping? Did I drink enough water? Did I have too much coffee today? Did I feed myself? Because sometimes, you're picking off meals of little kids and that's all you have. And so really looking holistically, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. When you like hit those moments of like, I am feeling pressured, like I need to add that fourth day on, or you're just kind of frustrated with that gradual pace, what is helpful for you?
This I find hard. Like in the early, if I'm remembering, like those infomercials where they try to sell you stuff, you are so vulnerable to being like sometimes I almost bought something where this like supplement that's promising these things. And I have to just sit there and I'm like, okay, why am I feeling this way? And then you can get honest. And sometimes you cry and you're like, I don't feel good about where I am right now in my body. And just being honest and knowing, okay, this is a season. I know I will move through that. And so for myself, because that's not my strongest, is like feeling my feelings is often what I have to do to kind of move through that and just be like, no, I have just be honest with myself. And that way you can hopefully move through those things. I find journaling to be nice. I also find if like the anger could be something, because I do have clients who are like, get angry, but maybe just shove it down. Like we do like pillow slams, where they take the pillow and just kind of do the slams, unless you have a weighted ball and you do ball slams. Clients, especially moms in particular, really like the ball slams at some point. It's just to get out some frustration and just like that safe, healthy manner. And it's part of the workout. And so that can be different ways that I personally am fighting it, but it's not easy at all. Like I find those infomercials I always know, okay, this is where my headspace is at when I start to feel like I need to buy that quick fix, then I'm like, oh, hold on, what's underneath all of that? Why am I feeling that? And that's what I usually come back to.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate hearing that because, even as somebody who, you know, I do this for a living. Like I teach this stuff, I talk about this stuff, and it's still hard. Like it was still hard. It was still hard to ask for the support that I needed. It was still hard to be patient with myself. Like all those
100%.
things are still real. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean, to be patient, that is not easy. Like as my son like just would not sleep for so long, I'm like, it's like, oh, we'll get there. But when you're in the middle of that and you're like, he's waking up multiple times a night, like that is hard because you're like, I hear you, but also I am just completely fried. And so like that's, just honoring again where you're at and knowing hopefully eventually it will get better. Cause I do have clients who have, you know, their 11-year-old still doesn't sleep great. And so like sometimes there are stages and then we work, how can we work through? How can I best serve you today? And sometimes this is why I love like that yoga side of the personal training, what I do. And she's like, no, I need yoga today. I just need yin yoga. I just need to lay down. I cannot work out. And again, she battles the I shoulds, but then she honors, no, but tuning in, it wasn't a good night. I got to do yoga. And that to me is my favorite, is if like everyone can kind of just pause and just knowing that that's one isn't better than the other. It's where are you at today? What is your nervous system need? What do you need truly? And being honest, because some days it is like, oh no, I really should move my body. And other days, no, I really do need that restorative yoga class and just kind of rest.
Totally. And, there's that fine balance right there of when we do hit the sweet spot of like the type of movement that we need, it brings like a restoration. It like gives us some energy in places where maybe we were just feeling total depletion. I'm curious if you can speak a little bit to like sort of the healing and the rebalancing that can come from like the right type of movement.
That is one of my favorites. So I teach quite a bit of yin yoga, and yin yoga is one of my favorites. Postpartum, being careful with how much you stretch during that early postpartum phase. But yin is my kind of anchor point with people of just sprinkling that in because I don't think we often think about that. Do I need movement? What do I need? And so that's why I like to have that threaded throughout a lot of those classes. And you can do yin at home. You don't need any props either or restorative yoga. But then as you're sitting there in stillness, in quietness, because sometimes we need that stillness to truly hear, I find that can be kind of your answer. And so for myself, I do have a lot of the going practices, but I balance it out on the flip side with like yin every single day, at least for 15 minutes, yoga nidra a few times a week. I meditate every day. I go to acupuncture a few times a month. Like I have a lot of grounding practices to balance that energy. I don't know how, because sometimes people are like, how do you get it all in? I have no idea how. I really don't know how. But that is personally how I find balance. And so for you, if you're looking, where's my bucket? Is my bucket primarily with these go practices? And my bucket over here is really low. Then you might need to start filling this bucket up. And ideally, balance is going to be different again for me than it is for you, than to anyone. You kind of know when you feel your best. And then you have to see which bucket needs to be filled so I can feel that balance.
I love that. And I will say too, like I mentioned earlier, that, athletics wasn't really a part of my life as a young person. And um, as I've grown older, like I've realized that it's like, it's non-negotiable. Like there has to be movement and there has to be some attention to, whether it's yoga one day, what like meditation all the time, like any moment I can, because those things completely shift the way I experience every other thing in my life. I've
100%.
realized like the last 2, 3 years, like it has to be non-negotiable because otherwise everything just feels harder.
mean, I just taught a strength class, and I had a lady in there. She was in her, mid 70s. And then I have people in their young 20s in that class. And, she came in and it was her first time. And so I usually like to get to know, how, do you strength train? What's kind of your background? And she was like, no, I usually gentle yoga. That's what I've been doing for years. She's like, this is really out of my element. And I'm like, well, welcome. I'll make sure I'll give you modifications. And afterwards, she came up to me. She's like, I loved it. Like, I pushed myself and I felt so good. And you gave me the things to do. So that's also where, if you've maybe been to classes, like, you should have those modifications. She is not going to do what maybe the 20-year-old was doing, on the Bosu ball. I'm like, that's maybe not the safest thing for her, but I gave her, here's some modifications. And it felt empowering to her because she's like, I could keep up, I could do the things, and I still feel great. And so that is also, kind of your green flag or red flag. If you go to classes, like, you should leave feeling empowered and like, yes, I can do this, versus I felt completely lost. I felt drained. I didn't know what I was doing. I would try something else. Like, that might not be the right either class, teacher, whatever, maybe the class structure, and try again, try again.
That's so beautiful. I wish I could take your classes, Andrea. I'm the kind of person that I need to be in a class. I need the teacher to tell me what to do because it's just effortless. I don't have to think about it, and I'll do it, and I'll push myself a little bit past where I'm comfortable, in a good way, But if I'm at home, I'm more likely to, it's enough. Um, but I just have witnessed, like, through my own journey, how imperative, like, a healthy return to fitness rather than like the too much too fast, or on the other hand, just not doing it. And there's so much to be said for the medicine that is involved in finding where we can grow stronger and how that impacts how settled we feel inside. There's like a real, like, sustainable groundedness that comes from not only just doing it, but honestly giving ourselves the time, like telling ourselves that we are a priority. There's so much like giving out and output, whether we're care providers, whether we're parents, like, we give so much. And so to set aside that time that's for us in whatever way, I think there's like an impact on consciousness there beyond just the benefits to the physical body.
That's usually where, personally, like, I have the most like downloads after a really strong workout. I'm like, boom, this comes through. It kind of clears the clutter, and you're just like, this just dropped in. This is the direction I need to do, or just like something that sparked my interest. I'm like, I need to explore this more. So for me, that's also where I find that to be a good outlet of just like, fresh slate. Let's get out the junk. Here's a fresh piece of paper. What are we painting today?
Mm, I love that. I love that. So Andrea, as we close, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing about your perspectives here, which are so beautiful. But, what is something that you would invite our listeners to think about as they take the next steps in their own journey towards, yeah, like getting in touch with our body and growing our strength and flexibility?
Ooh, I would say the one of the best things that you can do, and this could be difficult as well, is I think social media can really throw people into different buckets in terms of like, I need a weighted vest now. I can't just go for a walk. I need to have that. Otherwise, what good am I doing? Oh, I should be, doing sprints on a bike instead of on, a treadmill. I think it can lead to so much confusion. And so, if anything, when you look through there, if you're leaving confused, I would just come back to yourself and even just like close the eyes and be like, what do I need? And like really tune into that, because the trends, they change all the time. And at the end of the day, for myself, I started at 16 lifting weights 3 times a week. I am still consistently doing that. That's what I always come back to, and it's nothing fancy. Like, if you ask a lot of the trainers, they're not doing fancy, or I have not really changed the main lifts that I've been doing since I was 16. I change up my workout every 6 weeks, and it's just basic things that sometimes, again, that's not what sells on social media. And they just put shiny lipstick on things and you're like, oh, I should do this. No, you don't really need to. Like if you ask most trainers, it's really basic things. You know, you're moving your body, you're lifting to your capacity, you're having rest days, and you're repeating just consistently. You miss a day, no big deal. There's always next week.
Mm, I love that. Thank you so much. Where can folks find out more about you, Andrea?
My website, so my name is just Andrea Claassen, and it's got two A's and two S's, a little tricky. And then Instagram as well, Seasonal Andrea. That's where I also hang out from time to time.
And do you work with clients virtually as well as in person?
I do virtual. So I do, we do postpartum. So I specialize in that. And then perimenopause is another one I specialize in. And I do have like a group coaching program that will be starting next in February. So
Oh, that's amazing to hear. Wonderful. Well, folks who are listening, I'll make sure to have all those links in our show notes. And Andrea, thanks for all you do. You're amazing.
thank you so much, Christine.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Center for Sacred Window Studies has been training postpartum care providers, professionals who work with new families, and individuals passionate about postpartum care since 2018. We regularly host live free events alongside our online and in-person training and certification programs. Hop on our newsletter list to get direct access to all of our events and community support gatherings. Our mission is not only in training conscious postpartum care providers, but in fostering a robust, informed, and thriving community of postpartum professionals. Once you step inside, you're family forever. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com to add your email to our newsletter list. You can support our work by subscribing to the Sacred Window podcast and sharing with someone you know who would love it. Thanks for being here and participating in the culture-wide shift that recognizes the need for and the importance of conscious postpartum care.